He smiled in the family portrait, just 6 days before he slaughtered them all. What could drive a father to take the lives of his wife, and his own children? This isn't just a story about murder. It's about control, obsession, and a final, fatal refusal. Stay with us as we unpack every chilling detail. Like, subscribe, and share your thoughts in the comments. He woke up early that morning, just like any other day. Marcus Riley had never seemed like the kind of man who could do something unspeakable. A father, a husband, respected by his community, admired for his calm demeanor and quiet strength. But within hours, that same man would shatter his entire family, ending their lives in a way that left the world questioning everything they thought they knew about him. The house was quiet, the kind of peace you only hear in homes where everything is in its place, where everything appears perfect. A picture-perfect family, smiling for the camera, dressed in their Sunday best. But behind that smile, behind the picture, was a man whose anger had been growing, a man whose jealousy and obsession had been building to an uncontrollable force. This wasn't a crime of passion. This wasn't a momentary lapse of judgment. This was something calculated, deliberate. And it all began with a simple word, no. Jada Riley had just refused him. A small word. A simple refusal. But for Marcus, it was the spark that ignited everything. For years, he'd controlled his wife, manipulated her into staying by his side. She was his possession. And the thought of her leaving him, of her choosing to stand up for herself, was something he couldn't bear. Jada had made her decision. She was done. She had found the courage to ask for a divorce, to break free from the man who had once been her world, but whose grip had grown tighter and tighter. She had planned to leave. She had found a way out. But Marcus wasn't going to let that happen. By the time the sun had set, Marcus had already made his move. He had executed his plan. No one saw it coming. No one could have possibly known that the man who'd always been the rock of his family would one day be the one to destroy it all. And then, the phone call came. A neighbor, a coworker, someone who had spoken to Jada just the day before, called the police. Jada hadn't shown up for work. The children hadn't been seen outside, playing in the yard like they always did. And when the police arrived at the Riley home, they found nothing but silence. Inside, the scene was chilling. Jada, Marcus, and their 3 children, Ava, Micah, and Layla, lay lifeless in the home. The blood on the walls, the broken furniture, the signs of a violent struggle. It was clear from the moment the police entered that this wasn't some random act of violence. This wasn't a robbery gone wrong. No, this was far more personal. And Marcus? He was nowhere to be found. The question echoed through the investigators' minds, where had he gone? Was he dead? Had he taken his own life, too? Or had he just disappeared? Days passed. And then, finally, a breakthrough. Marcus's body was found, miles away from his home. He had taken his own life, just like so many had feared. But even in death, he wasn't through with his twisted plan. The investigation unraveled in ways no one could have predicted. It turned out that Marcus hadn't acted alone. He had been hiding secrets. Secrets about money, about control, about power. His life insurance policy was a ticking time bomb, set to pay out if Jada died under suspicious circumstances. Jada's diary was discovered. It told a different story, one of a woman who had spent years hiding her pain, silencing her fears, and making her plans in secret. She had been afraid of what Marcus might do, but she never imagined it would come to this. Each new piece of evidence brought with it another layer of shock, another twist in the story that no one saw coming. This wasn't a simple case of a man snapping. This was the tragic end to a woman's struggle for freedom, a family's life stolen by the very man who was supposed to protect them. As the details came to light, the community was left in disbelief. How could a father, a man who was supposed to be the protector, turn on his own family in such a brutal, merciless way? But the answer was right in front of them. buried deep within Marcus's actions. A refusal, a word spoken by his wife, was all it took to drive him to this unthinkable act. And now, the world was left to ask, was it worth it? Was taking everything from his family worth the brief moment of control he had over them? The answers were out there. But they didn't bring comfort. They didn't bring peace. They just brought more questions. Stay with us as we unravel the story, piece by piece. From the first moment of Marcus's chilling decision to the devastating aftermath, we'll take you through every detail. Every secret. Every lie. What happened in that house that night? How did a man who once loved his family end up destroying them in cold blood? And, perhaps most importantly, why? The days after Marcus Riley's death were filled with disbelief and shock. His community, his co-workers, even his closest friends, could not reconcile the man they knew with the horror that had unfolded in his home. The story of a seemingly perfect family, destroyed by one man's uncontrollable rage, was too much to grasp. How could the father of three, a wealthy, well-respected figure, commit such an unimaginable crime? As investigators pieced together the evidence, they began to uncover the layers of Marcus's life that had been hidden from the outside world. His calm exterior, his stoic demeanor, his public persona, none of it had prepared anyone for the depth of darkness that ran beneath the surface. The discovery of Jada's diary was the key to understanding the unraveling of Marcus's mind. In the pages of her private thoughts, a story unfolded that no one knew. Jada had kept secrets, yes, but they were not of infidelity or betrayal. They were secrets of survival, of a woman trying desperately to hold her family together despite the suffocating control of her husband. Jada had written about Marcus's possessiveness, his jealousy, his increasing emotional and psychological abuse. She had documented his behavior, the small signs of his temper that gradually grew into something darker, more consuming. But even in her writings, Jada never predicted the depths to which Marcus would go. She had feared for her safety, yes, but she never imagined that he would take everything from her, her life, the lives of their children, and the very future she had dreamed of. The more investigators dug into Marcus's financial records, the more they uncovered about the lengths he had gone to in order to secure control over Jada. Life insurance policies, hidden bank accounts, secret loans, all designed to ensure that if things went wrong, he would still come out on top. He had invested in a web of deceit, and it was clear he had been planning for a moment just like this, when he could take what he felt he was owed. One of the most disturbing revelations came when the police found text messages between Marcus and a business partner just days before the murders. The messages were oddly casual, discussing investments and projects, but they hinted at a level of control Marcus had over every part of his life, including his family. It was as if he viewed them not as people, but as assets. Tools to be manipulated. And then, the forensic evidence came in. Marcus's gun, found at the scene of his death, was the same one used in the murders. A cold, chilling fact that made it clear that Marcus had been in complete control until the very end. He hadn't snapped in a moment of fury, he had executed his plan with cold precision. The evidence suggested that he had killed Jada first, taking her life in a brutal, calculated manner. Then, he turned on the children, ending their lives without mercy, before finally turning the gun on himself. The community was rocked to its core. How could this happen? How had a man they had all trusted, who had been so successful, so composed, so admired, allowed his own greed and jealousy to consume him in this way? And yet, it was the most terrifying thing of all. Marcus had been playing a game, one that no one had realized he was in until it was too late. He had spent years manipulating his wife, controlling her every move, convincing her that she had no choice but to stay. He had thought he could keep her trapped forever. And when she found a way out, when she refused him for the first time, he couldn't bear it. The tragic irony, of course, was that Marcus had believed he could control every aspect of his life. He thought he could control Jada, the children, even his own fate. But in the end, it was his own inability to accept rejection, his failure to see the humanity of the people closest to him, that led to his downfall. As the trial began, the courtroom was filled with stunned silence. No one could understand how a man could so coldly destroy the very people who had been closest to him. The evidence was overwhelming, but even more haunting were the testimonies from those who had known Marcus best. His family, his co-workers, his friends, they all spoke of a man who seemed incapable of such violence. They spoke of his charity work, his community involvement, his role as a father. No one had seen the darkness that had been hiding beneath. But the truth was undeniable. In the end, Marcus's life was defined by his inability to let go. He had been so obsessed with controlling the people around him, so determined to maintain his hold over his family, that he had allowed his obsession to drive him to murder. As the trial neared its conclusion, the victims' families found little comfort in the justice that had been served. The lives of Jada, Ava, Micah, and Layla had been taken in a way that would never be forgotten. The small victories of a conviction couldn't erase the trauma that Marcus's actions had left behind. As we reflect on this heartbreaking story, the questions linger. Could Marcus have been stopped before it was too late? Could Jada have ever fully escaped his grip? And what drives a person to destroy their own family, to take everything from them simply because they can no longer control them? These are the questions that will haunt this case forever. And as we continue to uncover the details of the tragedy, we must remember the victims. Jada, Ava, Micah, and Layla, they were the ones who truly suffered. They were the ones who had their lives stolen from them, taken by the very man who should have been their protector. What truly happened in that house? How could a man so seemingly good, so successful, fall so far? The answers may never fully satisfy us, but one thing is certain, this is a story that will stay with you forever. As we close this chapter, we leave you with the question, do we ever really know the people we trust the most? And what are the true costs of control? The aftermath of Marcus Riley's horrific actions rippled through the community, shattering any sense of security that had once existed. Friends, colleagues, and neighbors were left to pick up the pieces, struggling to comprehend how someone they had once admired could commit such a monstrous act. Marcus had been a man who exuded confidence. To those around him, he was the epitome of success, a man who had built an empire, a family, a life that others could only envy. His social circle had seen him as a generous and well-meaning patriarch, the kind of person who spoke at charity events, made large donations, and was always willing to lend a hand. But now, in the wake of his death and the gruesome murders of his wife and children, the facade of the perfect family had crumbled into nothing more than a web of deceit. Forensic evidence and investigators had revealed the cold precision with which Marcus executed his plan. The discovery of several life insurance policies for his wife and children painted a chilling picture. Marcus had been planning for this moment far longer than anyone could have imagined. The policies were all substantial, the payout significant enough to leave him in complete control of his financial future. He had invested in his family's death as a final act of control, an act that would allow him to claim everything he felt was rightfully his. Jada had been the first victim. It was clear from the evidence that Marcus had taken his time with her, carefully executing his plan as though it were a business transaction, devoid of any emotion. Forensics showed that the manner in which Jada had been killed was methodical. The killer had been calm, deliberate, and precise. Her body had been positioned in a way that suggested Marcus had been trying to convey some form of control, not just over her life, but over her legacy as well. Then, as if the pain of Jada's death wasn't enough, Marcus had turned his attention to the children. Micah, the eldest, had been the first to try to protect his siblings. At just 14, Micah had realized the danger far too late, but his attempts to save his sisters were futile. Layla, only 8 years old, had been the most vulnerable, innocent, and trusting. She had no idea what was coming until it was too late. Ava, who had been just 12, had begged her father to stop, but her cries fell on deaf ears. The sight of the 3 children, lying lifeless in their home, was a haunting image that stayed with investigators long after the case had ended. It was a scene of pure devastation. No one could understand how a man who had once promised to protect them could betray them in such a heartless manner. As the weeks went on, investigators continued to dig deeper into Marcus's life. They discovered that his obsession with control went far beyond his family. He had meticulously planned every aspect of his life. Every business venture, every investment, every relationship, all of it had been calculated to give him the upper hand. Even his marriage to Jada had been a strategic move, a way to secure his place in society. She was beautiful, smart, and elegant, the perfect complement to his public image. But in the privacy of their home, Jada had been his prisoner. During the investigation, it was revealed that Marcus had become increasingly paranoid. His jealousy had consumed him to the point where he no longer trusted anyone, even those closest to him. His obsession with Jada's every move became more intense. His actions became erratic and unpredictable. But even with these signs, no one had suspected he was capable of murder. Marcus had always been a man who thrived on control, and as his marriage began to crack under the weight of his demands, he grew desperate. When Jada finally pushed back, when she refused to submit to his will any longer, that was when Marcus's world began to fall apart. And in that moment, he chose to tear apart everything that had ever mattered to him. The police discovered a chilling conversation on Marcus's phone just days before the murders. A text exchange with a friend revealed the final straw. "She's going to leave me," Marcus had texted. "I'll have nothing if she goes. Nothing but my damn money. I can't let that happen." In those words, Marcus had sealed his fate. He had chosen control over love, violence over peace. And once his mind had been made up, there was no turning back. The case against Marcus was built on a foundation of overwhelming evidence. His fingerprints were found on the gun. His DNA was found on his wife and children's bodies. The 911 call that had been made to report the incident came from his phone, though he claimed to have no memory of the events. But for the investigators, the question wasn't just about the how, it was about the why. Why had a man who appeared to have it all, who seemed to be living the dream, turned so violently against the people he had vowed to love and protect? It was the trial that truly shook the community to its core. As the details of Marcus's life were revealed, the image of the man they had all known began to unravel. The courtroom was filled with gasps of disbelief as prosecutors detailed the chilling sequence of events that had led to the deaths of Jada and the children. But there were no emotional outbursts, no dramatic confessions. Marcus sat in silence, his face a mask of indifference. His lawyers tried to argue that he had been suffering from a mental breakdown, but the jury wasn't swayed. In the end, the verdict was clear. Marcus Riley was convicted of all charges. But even as the jury returned their guilty verdict, there were no celebrations. No sense of justice, no closure. The family that had once been whole was now gone, erased from existence. And in their place, only the memory of a man who had let his need for control destroy everything. As the years passed, the story of Marcus Riley's crime became a cautionary tale. It was a reminder of how power, greed, and jealousy could consume even the most seemingly perfect lives. But it also raised important questions. How do we truly know the people closest to us? How do we recognize the signs of control before it's too late? And how far can a person go before they lose all sense of humanity? The truth of what happened that night may never fully make sense, but one thing remains clear: the lives lost were not just victims of a senseless murder. They were the victims of a man who had spent his entire life trying to control every aspect of his world, and in the end, it was that very desire for control that destroyed everything he held dear. This case, as tragic as it was, serves as a reminder that sometimes, those we trust the most are the ones we should fear the most. Because beneath the surface, even the most perfect lives can hide a darkness that, when unleashed, has the power to destroy everything in its path. The trial had been harrowing for the surviving family members. Jada's parents, her friends, and even Marcus's own family had to sit through the painful recounting of what had happened that night. Witness testimonies painted a picture of a man who was once charming, whose smile could disarm even the most skeptical of people. But behind that smile, there had been a ticking time bomb, waiting for the right moment to explode. Marcus's defense team had tried to argue that his actions were a result of mental illness, claiming that years of stress, financial pressures, and marital strain had led to his violent outburst. They presented evidence of his troubled upbringing, his difficult relationship with his own parents, and the pressure he had felt to live up to the expectations of those around him. They argued that, while he was responsible for the murders, he was not in full control of his faculties at the time of the killings. But the prosecution wasn't swayed. They painted Marcus as a man who had meticulously planned the murders, someone who had made deliberate choices every step of the way. They presented evidence of his calculated behavior, how he had chosen the weapons, how he had waited for the perfect moment, and how he had executed the murders with chilling precision. They also highlighted the fact that Marcus had seemed to show no remorse for his actions. In his 911 call, he had barely sounded shaken by what he had done. The case captivated the nation, and media outlets from across the country flocked to cover the trial. News anchors delivered the details with grim faces, the stories filling every newspaper, every social media feed. People from all walks of life seemed to be watching, hoping for justice, but also struggling to understand how a man they had once admired could do something so unthinkable. The brutality of the crime made it impossible for people to look away. The final moments of the trial were the most emotional. The victims' families spoke in the courtroom, their voices shaking with grief. Jada's mother spoke about the pain of losing her daughter, her son-in-law, and her grandchildren in one fell swoop. "I lost everything that night," she said through tears. "Jada was my best friend. My daughter. My world. And now they're all gone. I will never get to hold my grandchildren again. They're never coming home. And Marcus took them from me." In the end, Marcus was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. The judge called his actions senseless, selfish, and heartless. As the gavel came down, Marcus's face was emotionless, as though the weight of his crimes hadn't fully sunk in. He had ruined so many lives, but he showed no signs of remorse. To him, it seemed that his own suffering was the only thing that mattered. In the aftermath of the trial, the survivors of the massacre tried to rebuild their lives, though it was clear that the wounds would never fully heal. Jada's parents found themselves lost without their daughter. Micah's friends were forced to carry on without their best friend, his empty seat a reminder of the promise he had held in life. The little girl, Layla, who had once been so full of joy, was now left with only memories of a family that would never come back. The crime had left a lasting scar on everyone involved, a reminder that even the most seemingly perfect lives could be shattered in an instant. The name Marcus Riley would forever be associated with tragedy, and the horror of what he did to his family would echo through the years. Those who had known him would never forget the man they once thought they knew, and the families left behind would carry the weight of their loss for the rest of their lives. And as time went on, the question remained, what could have been done to prevent this? Could anyone have seen the warning signs? Could Jada have escaped earlier? Could anyone have stopped Marcus before it was too late? The answers to those questions, like so many in true crime stories, may never come. What was clear, though, was that the price of Marcus's need for control had been too high, a price that no one should ever have to pay. As the story of Marcus Riley and his family comes to a close, we're left with lingering questions. Could this tragedy have been prevented? Was there a moment when someone could have intervened? What do you think drove him to such violence? We want to hear your thoughts. Do you believe the right justice was served? Let us know your theories in the comments below. If you found this case compelling, make sure to like this video, share it with others, and subscribe to the channel for more gripping true crime stories. Hit the notification bell so you never miss an update. Your engagement helps us keep telling these important stories. Stay tuned for more.